The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was older than most stars. Its walls were made of crystal that had been grown over thousands of years. Light from distant suns passed through these walls and created rainbows that danced across the floor. 1,200 seats rose up in a circle, each one holding a representative from a different species. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and wide. Some had no bodies at all and existed only as light or sound. In the center of this great hall, standing on a small platform, was a single human woman. Her name was. She was 43 years old. She had spent the last 15 years of her life learning the languages and customs of alien species. She had trained for this moment since she was a young girl. And now, standing before the most powerful beings in the known universe, she felt very small. But she did not let them see her fear. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. A small device near her throat translated her words into 1,000 different languages at once. "I come before you today to make a petition on behalf of Earth and all of humanity." The hall was silent. 1,200 pairs of eyes or sensors or other organs that served the same purpose watched her carefully. 3 months ago, the Empire declared ownership of our solar system. They have given us 90 cycles to leave our home or face complete destruction. Pause to let her words sink in. "We are asking the Council to recognize our right to exist. We are asking for protection under the Galactic Charter." High Arbiter sat at the highest point in the chamber, was not a creature of flesh and blood, was a being of pure geometric light, a consciousness that existed in patterns and angles. When spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Ambassador said, this is humanity's third petition to the Council. We have already explained our position twice before. With respect, High Arbiter, our situation has changed." Pressed a button on her wrist. A holographic image of Earth appeared above her head. The blue planet turned slowly, showing its oceans and continents. "They have moved 12,000 warships into our system. They have begun construction of a weapon that will burn away our atmosphere. This is no longer a territorial dispute. This is the planned murder of 8 billion people." A ripple went through the assembled representatives. Murder was a strong word, but had chosen it carefully. A representative from the collective, a species of connected minds that appeared as a swarm of tiny insects, spoke next. Their voice was like the buzzing of 100 bees speaking in perfect harmony. "The claim to our region of space was registered with this council 347 years ago," they said. "At that time, humanity had not yet developed radio communication. By the laws of this council, they have legal ownership of your system." "Legal ownership of empty space, perhaps," replied. "But we exist now. We are here now. Does your law truly say that because we developed our technology too slowly, we have no right to live?" Silence fell over the chamber again. Could see discomfort on some of the faces looking down at her. Many of these species had their own stories of near extinction. Many of them had faced similar threats in their past, but none of them spoke in her defense. "The Galactic Charter exists to prevent war between member species," High Arbiter said. "Humanity is not a member species. You have not completed the 3 requirements for membership. You have not unified your planet under a single government. You have not demonstrated peaceful intentions through 100 years of non-aggression. And you have not developed faster-than-light travel on your own." "We were about to meet the first requirement," said. Her voice remained calm, but her hands were shaking. "The threat from the brought our nations together faster than anything else could have. We have a unified government now. We have stopped all wars among ourselves. Does that mean nothing?" "It means you reacted to external pressure," said a representative from the Empire, a species of tall, gray-skinned beings with 4 arms. "It does not prove that you would have chosen peace on your own. Many species unite when faced with death. Most return to war when the threat is gone." Wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them that they were wrong about humanity. She wanted to promise that humans would be good and peaceful members of the galactic community. But she knew that promises meant nothing here. Only actions mattered, and humanity had not been given enough time to prove itself through actions. "What would you have us do?" she asked. Her voice was quieter now. "Where can 8 billion people go? We do not have the ships. We do not have the technology. They have offered us nothing except death." "That is a matter between humanity and the Empire," said. "The Council cannot intervene in the lawful activities of a member species within their own territory." "Lawful activities," felt her control slipping. "You call genocide lawful." "We call it unfortunate," replied. "We call it regrettable, but we also call it legal. They have followed all proper protocols. They gave you warning. They offered you the chance to leave. What more can we demand of them? You can demand that they show mercy. You can demand that they let us live. We cannot demand anything of a sovereign member species acting within their own borders." His voice carried no emotion. It was simply stating facts. This council exists to keep peace between its members. Humanity is not a member. Our decision must reflect that reality. Looked around the great chamber. 1,200 representatives sat in their crystal seats. Some looked at her with pity. Some looked at her with curiosity. Some did not look at her at all. But none of them looked at her with the intention of helping. "Is there no one here who will speak for us?" she asked. "Is there no one who believes that 8 billion lives are worth saving?" The silence that followed was her answer. In Seoul, in a room buried deep beneath the city, General watched the transmission from the council chamber. Around him sat the leaders of what was now Earth's unified government. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and scientists, all watching the same terrible scene. When bowed her head and walked out of the chamber, when the hologram of Earth flickered and disappeared, when the transmission ended with a soft click, turned to face the others. His face was calm, his voice was steady, but his eyes held something that none of them had seen before. It was not fear, it was not despair, it was something harder and colder. "They have made their choice," he said. "Now we make ours." A woman named the head of Earth's Secret Research Division spoke up. "General, the project is still theoretical. We have never tested it on anything larger than a small asteroid. To try it on an entire planet." "Do we have any other option?" asked. No one answered. "Then we proceed," he said. "We have 5 years. To think we will spend that time crying and begging. Let them think that. Let the Council think that. Let the entire galaxy think that humanity has accepted its fate." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Seoul continued its daily business. Cars moved through streets. People walked to work. Children played in parks. 8 billion people living their lives, unaware that they had just been sentenced to death by beings they had never met. "We will not beg," said. "We will not cry. We will not give them the satisfaction of watching us die with whimpers." He turned back to face the room. "If we must die, we will die doing the impossible, and if, by some miracle, we succeed." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Everyone in that room understood. If humanity succeeded in what they were planning, everything would change. Not just for Earth, for the entire galaxy. The meeting ended. The leaders returned to their countries, and the real work began. Far above Earth, the observation ships continued their watch. Their sensors tracked the movement of human ships, the signals from human satellites, the heat from human cities. Their analysts wrote reports about human behavior and human psychology. They predicted panic. They predicted violence. They predicted the slow breakdown of human civilization as the deadline approached. They did not predict what was actually happening beneath the surface of the planet. They planned to destroy. They did not predict that humanity had already begun building something that would make the entire council regret this day. They did not predict that, in refusing to save humanity, they had created something far more dangerous than they could imagine. They did not predict that this small, primitive, stubborn species was about to change the rules of the universe itself. But they would learn. In time, they would all learn. 3 kilometers beneath the mountains, in a facility that officially did not exist, Doctor had not seen sunlight in 732 days. She kept count. Every morning when she woke up in her small concrete room, she added another line to the marks on her wall. It helped her remember that time was still passing. It helped her remember that there was still a world above. The facility was called Site 7. It was one of 12 such sites scattered across the planet, each one working on a different piece of the same impossible puzzle. The workers at each site knew only their own part. Only a handful of people, including and General, knew how all the pieces fit together. "Show me the latest results," said to her colleague. They stood in a massive underground chamber filled with equipment that hummed and clicked. Cables as thick as tree trunks ran along the walls. Screens displayed numbers and graphs that would have made no sense to anyone outside this room. Pulled up the data on a holographic display. His face was tired. None of them slept much anymore. "We successfully transported the test mass yesterday, a sphere of iron exactly 1 meter in diameter." "How far?" 16 light years. Allowed himself a small smile. It arrived at the target coordinates within acceptable parameters, less than 100 kilometers of drift. Nodded, but she did not smile. And the energy consumption. The smile faded from his face. Approximately the same as the total energy output of the sun for 3 seconds. For 1 meter of iron. "Yes." Was silent for a long moment. The math was simple, and it was terrible. Earth's diameter was about 12,700 kilometers. Its mass was about 6 trillion kilograms. To move the entire planet using this technology would require more energy than all the stars in the galaxy produced in a year. "We need to find a different approach," she said finally. "There is one possibility." His voice was hesitant. "We could use the planet itself as the energy source." "Explain." "The core of the Earth contains enormous amounts of energy, heat, pressure, rotation. If we could tap into that energy, convert it directly into the field we need." He trailed off, seeing the expression on his face. "You are suggesting we destroy our own planet to save it." "Not destroy," said quickly. "Just use a portion of it. The outer core is liquid iron. If we extracted, say, 40% of it, the planet would become unstable, earthquakes, volcanoes. The magnetic field would collapse." Shook her head. "We would survive the jump only to die from the consequences." "Maybe, maybe not. I ran some simulations. If we do it correctly, if we control the extraction precisely, the planet could stabilize again over time. A few decades of difficult conditions, but nothing that would cause extinction." Walked to a window that looked out over the main laboratory. Below, hundreds of scientists and engineers worked at their stations. They had given up everything for this project. Their families, their friends, their normal lives. They worked 18-hour days. They slept in shifts. Some of them had died from exhaustion or accidents. All of them knew that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "The deadline is in 3 years and 4 months. If we want to complete the project, we need to start large-scale construction in 18 months. That gives us 18 months to solve the remaining problems." "And how many problems remain?" Looked at his tablet. Approximately 416 major technical challenges, 63 of which we currently have no theoretical solution for. Let out a long breath. 416 problems in 18 months, 6 problems per week, and 63 of them were currently considered unsolvable. "Then we better get to work," she said. Above ground, the world continued its strange performance. General had ordered a careful campaign of deception. Factories that once built cars and electronics now built ships and weapons, but they did so in secret, underground, hidden from sensors. On the surface, the factories appeared to be closing down. Workers went home. Machines fell silent. Cities began to empty. This was not deception, it was necessity. The underground construction required millions of workers. Young men and women who had been students or office workers now dug tunnels and laid cables. They were told they were building shelters for the evacuation. In a way, this was true. They just did not know where the evacuation would take them. They watched all of this with satisfaction. Their analysts wrote reports about human psychology. They had seen this pattern before in other species they had conquered. First came denial, then came anger, then came desperate attempts to negotiate. Finally came acceptance. Humanity appeared to be moving through these stages exactly as predicted. Admiral of the Third Fleet read these reports in his quarters aboard the command ship. He was a creature of tradition and protocol. His species had conquered 11 star systems in the past 1,000 years. They had exterminated 4 species that had refused to leave their territory. Humanity would be the 5th. The humans have reduced their industrial output by 40%, his aide reported. Satellite activity has decreased by 60%. Their military exercises have stopped completely. All signs indicate they are preparing for evacuation. Where do they think they will go? Asked. They have no faster-than-light capability. Their slowest generation ships would take 10,000 years to reach the nearest habitable system. Our analysts believe they are building such ships now, in secret. The construction would explain their reduced surface activity. They are putting all their resources into escape vessels that will launch before the deadline. Made a sound that served as laughter for his species. Let them try. We will destroy any ships that attempt to leave the system. Our sensors will detect any launch within seconds. They have no way out. Should we accelerate our timeline, Admiral? Strike before they can complete their ships. No, turn to look at the holographic display that showed Earth floating in space. Such a small planet, such a primitive species. We will follow proper protocol. The Council is watching. Other species are watching. We must show that they are civilized. We give them exactly the time we promised. Not 1 day more, not 1 day less. He did not know that beneath the surface of that small planet, the real work was happening. He did not know that humanity was not building escape ships at all. He did not know that in the deep places of the Earth, scientists were learning to bend the fabric of space itself. Months passed. On the surface, things continued to decline. Power plants shut down. Cities went dark. The great highways that had once carried millions of cars now stood empty. To the sensors, it looked like a civilization in its final days. Below the surface, the opposite was happening. New power plants came online, hidden beneath mountains and oceans. New factories produced exotic materials that had never existed before. New tunnels connected the 12 research sites into a single network. The largest engineering project in human history was taking shape in the darkness. Doctor worked without rest. Every day brought new problems and new solutions. The 63 unsolvable problems slowly became 50, then 30, then 10. Her team found ways around obstacles that had seemed impossible. They invented new mathematics. They discovered new physics. They did in months what should have taken centuries. But the cost was high. Workers died in accidents. Equipment failed in spectacular ways. One site had to be evacuated when an experiment created a gravity wave that crushed everything in a 2-kilometer radius. Attended the memorial services when she could. More often, she simply added names to the list on her wall. General visited Site 7 on the 1-year anniversary of the Council's rejection. He looked older than he had a year ago. The weight of 8 billion lives showed in every line on his face. "How close are we?" he asked. "Close," replied. "Maybe close enough. We have solved most of the theoretical problems. The engineering is progressing on schedule. But General, I have to be honest with you. We have never tested this on a planetary scale. We do not know what will happen." What is your best estimate for success? Thought about lying. She thought about giving him a number that would let him sleep at night, but she had never been good at lying. 40%, she said, maybe less. Was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was steady. And if we fail? If we fail, the planet could be torn apart. The process could create a black hole that consumes everything within a light year. The energy release could sterilize every world in this sector of the galaxy. Or it could simply not work, and we would have spent our last years on a fantasy instead of saying goodbye to our families. 40% chance of survival, said. 0% chance if we do nothing. That is correct. He nodded slowly. Then we proceed. Continue your work, Doctor. Humanity is counting on you. After he left, returned to her laboratory. On her desk sat a photograph of her parents. They lived in a small village in the countryside. They did not know what their daughter was doing. They only knew that she had gone away for important government work and that she would come home when it was finished. She picked up the photograph and looked at it for a long moment. I will bring you with me, she whispered. I will bring everyone with me, or I will die trying. She put the photograph down and went back to work. Outside in the darkness of space, the fleet waited. Their countdown continued. Their weapon was nearly complete. They had no doubt about the outcome. They should have. The morning of Earth's scheduled destruction began like any other morning. The sun rose over the Pacific Ocean. Birds sang in the trees. Waves crashed against empty beaches. Most of humanity had been moved underground by now, packed into the massive shelters that had been built over the past 5 years. They did not know what was about to happen. They had been told to wait, to stay calm, to trust their leaders. In the main control center beneath the mountains, Doctor sat at her station. Around her, 200 technicians monitored their screens. The air was thick with tension. No one spoke unless they had to. Every person in that room knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity lived or died. General stood beside her, watching the main display. It showed Earth from space, surrounded by a web of energy lines that connected the 12 research sites. These lines were invisible to normal sensors. They existed in dimensions that they did not even know about. 5 years of work, millions of lives sacrificed, trillions of dollars spent, all of it led to this moment. Status report, said. A young man named answered. He was the chief of the monitoring team, barely 30 years old. He had aged 10 years in the past 5. All 12 sites are online and synchronized. Power reserves are at maximum capacity. The field generators are stable. We are ready to proceed on your order, General. Looked at his watch. The deadline expired in exactly 2 hours. Their weapon would fire at that moment, releasing a beam of energy that would strip away Earth's atmosphere in seconds. Everyone on the surface would die first. Then the beam would continue, burning deeper and deeper until nothing remained but a ball of molten rock. The fleet, he asked. 12,000 ships positioned at the edge of the system. They are broadcasting the final warning. Humanity has 1 hour and 58 minutes to surrender or evacuate. And no one has responded. No, sir. As ordered, all human communications have ceased. They believe we have accepted our fate. Nodded slowly. Then let us give them a surprise they will never forget. He turned to, Doctor, you may begin. His hands were trembling. She had dreamed of this moment for years. She had also had nightmares about it. In her dreams, sometimes the Earth vanished safely. Sometimes it tore itself apart. Sometimes nothing happened at all, and she had to watch the weapon turn her world to ash. She took a deep breath and pressed the first button. Deep beneath the surface, in chambers that stretched for kilometers, massive machines began to hum. These were the field generators, designed to wrap the planet in a bubble of warped space. The technology was based on theories that had seemed like science fiction just 10 years ago. Now, it was humanity's only hope. Field generators are activating, reported. Power flow is nominal. We are beginning Phase 1. Phase 1 was the easy part. The field generators would create a shell around the entire planet, separating it from normal space. This had been tested on smaller scales, asteroids, chunks of rock, even a small moon in the outer solar system. It worked. The theory was sound. Phase 2 was the dangerous part. Beginning core extraction, said. Her voice was steady now. Once the process started, there was no going back. Either they succeeded or they died. Fear was pointless. In the center of the Earth, 4 billion kilometers below the surface, something unprecedented began to happen. The outer core, a sea of liquid iron and nickel that surrounded the solid inner core, started to glow. Not with heat, but with something else. The energy of the core was being converted, transformed from matter and heat into pure spatial distortion. The effects were felt immediately. The ground shook, not the sharp jolt of an earthquake, but a deep, continuous rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. In the shelters, millions of people looked up from their waiting. Children cried. Adults held each other. No one knew what was happening. Core extraction at 10%, reported. Seismic activity is within predicted parameters. Minor damage reported in sectors 12 through 15, but nothing critical. Continue, said. In space, Admiral noticed the seismic activity on his sensors. His aide brought him the data. The planet is experiencing unusual geological events, the aide said. Our scientists believe it may be a natural response to the stress of our weapons activation. Studied the readings. Something felt wrong, but he could not identify what. Continue monitoring. Notify me if there are any significant changes. Yes, Admiral. Back on Earth, the extraction continued. 20%, 30%. The ground shook harder now. Buildings collapsed on the surface, but there were no people left to be hurt by them. Rivers changed course. Mountains shifted. The entire planet was being transformed from the inside out. 40%, said. His voice was strained. We are approaching critical threshold. If we go beyond 50%, the planet may not stabilize afterward. The calculations say we need exactly 47%, replied. Not 1 point more, not 1 point less. Continue. In the command ship, Admiral's sensors began to scream. His aide rushed to his station. Admiral, something is happening to the planet. Energy readings are off the scale. We are detecting spatial distortions around the entire surface. Looked at the main display. Earth, which had seemed so small and helpless moments ago, was now wrapped in a glowing shell of light. The light pulsed and swirled, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. What are they doing? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. We have never seen anything like this. Our scientists have no explanation. Fire the weapon, now, before they complete whatever this is. The weapon is not ready. It needs 20 more minutes to reach full charge. 20 minutes, stared at the screen. In 20 minutes, that small blue world might be gone, not destroyed, transformed into something else, something that escaped his control. All ships, he ordered. Fire everything, every weapon, every missile, every beam. Destroy that planet now. 12,000 ships opened fire at once. The space around Earth lit up with weapons fire. Beams of energy, clouds of missiles, pulses of destruction, all of them raced toward the glowing sphere. None of them reached it. The spatial distortion field surrounding Earth bent space itself. The weapons' fire curved away, redirected into the void. Missiles exploded harmlessly in the emptiness. Beams scattered in 1,000 directions. The fleet could have fired for 1,000 years and never touched the planet inside that bubble. Core extraction at 47%, announced. Field strength is at maximum. All parameters are nominal. He paused, staring at his screen in disbelief. We are ready for Phase 3. Phase 3, the jump. Looked at General. In her eyes, he saw the question she could not ask out loud. Are we really going to do this? He nodded. Execute Phase 3 said. What happened next took place in less than a heartbeat, but it felt like eternity. The spatial distortion field expanded outward, then collapsed inward. The energy from 47% of Earth's core was released all at once, not as heat or light, but as pure motion through dimensions that had no name. On the command ship, Admiral watched as the planet Earth folded in on itself and disappeared. There was no explosion, there was no debris, there was no flash of light. One moment the planet was there. The next moment it was gone. In its place was empty space and a small automated probe that had been left behind. "Find them," ordered, his voice barely a whisper. "Find where they went." His science officers tried. They scanned every corner of the solar system. They searched for energy signatures, for gravitational disturbances, for any trace of where the planet might have gone. They found nothing. Because Earth was no longer in that galaxy. In a distant corner of the universe, in a region of space that no ship from the Galactic Council had ever visited, a yellow star suddenly had a new planet in orbit around it. The planet was battered and its surface was cracked by earthquakes. Volcanoes erupted along fault lines that had never existed before. The magnetic field flickered and jumped. Half the atmosphere had been lost in the transition. But it was there, and it was alive. In the control center beneath the mountains, the screens showed a new sky, new stars, a new sun rising over a horizon that had never seen it before. Doctor stared at the display. Tears ran down her face. Around her, technicians were shouting, crying, embracing each other. They had done it. The impossible had become possible. General put a hand on her shoulder. "Doctor," he said, "you have saved humanity." She shook her head. "We saved ourselves, General, and now," she looked at the new stars, at the unknown galaxy they had jumped into, "now we have work to do." The probe they had left behind activated exactly 1 hour after their departure. It broadcast a message to every species in the known galaxy, a message that Ambassador had recorded before the jump, a message that would echo through history. But that is a story for another part. For now, the survivors of Earth looked up at their new sky and began to rebuild. They had lost much. Nearly 1 million people had died during the transition, from earthquakes, from collapsed shelters, from equipment failures. The planet would need decades to stabilize. Resources were scarce. Challenges were endless. But they were alive. They were free. And they had proven something that no species in the history of the galaxy had ever proven before. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humanity did not die quietly. Humanity did not accept its fate. Humanity changed the rules of the universe itself. And in doing so, humanity became something the Galactic Council should have recognized long ago. A species worth fearing. The probe floated in the empty space where Earth had been. It was a small thing, barely 2 meters long, made of simple materials that would not attract attention. For exactly 1 hour after humanity's departure, it drifted silently, waiting for its programmed activation time. Around it, the fleet scrambled in confusion. Admiral had ordered every ship to search for the missing planet. Science vessels scanned nearby systems. Scout ships jumped to neighboring stars. Communication officers sent desperate messages to command, trying to explain what had happened without sounding insane. A planet had vanished, not destroyed, vanished. No explosion, no debris, no trace, just empty space where 8 billion lives had been moments before. And then the probe woke up. The signal it broadcast was not like normal communications. It used a frequency that every species in the local cluster could receive. It overrode security protocols that had been designed to prevent exactly this kind of intrusion. It forced its way into every communication array, every personal device, every display screen across 10,000 worlds. When Ambassador's face appeared on Admiral's command screen, he understood that something had changed forever. She looked different from the woman who had stood before the council 3 years ago. Her face was harder. Her eyes were colder. Behind her stood not diplomats or politicians, but soldiers and scientists, the architects of the impossible. "To the Galactic Council," she began. "To the Empire. To every species that watched, that knew, that chose to do nothing." Her voice carried across light years, reaching ears and sensors and receivers on worlds that had never heard a human speak before. "We came to you in peace. We asked only for the right to exist. You told us that our extermination was legal, proper, regrettable but acceptable." Paused. "So we left." In the great hall of the Galactic Council, where representatives from 1,200 species had gathered to witness Earth's destruction, the screens showed nothing but her face. High Arbiter watched in silence. The geometric patterns of consciousness flickered rapidly, a sign of deep disturbance. "But understand what this means," continued. "We have done what your greatest minds declared impossible. We moved a world across the universe in an instant, not a ship, not a colony, an entire planet with everything on it. 8 billion people carried to safety in the blink of an eye. The collective, the species of connected minds, processed this information across their entire network. In milliseconds, their shared consciousness reached a conclusion that spread fear through every connected individual. The humans had achieved something that would take the collective 10,000 years to replicate, if they could replicate it at all. Our children will grow up knowing what you did," said. "They will learn about the council that refused to protect them. They will learn about the who wanted to burn their home. They will learn about every species that looked away while 8 billion lives hung in the balance." On 100 different worlds, leaders and commanders watched with growing unease. The woman on the screen was not begging. She was not threatening. She was simply stating facts, and those facts were terrifying. "Our will master this technology. They will understand it, improve it, push it further than we ever imagined. Our great will do the same, and their children, and their children's children. For as long as humanity exists, we will remember this day." Stepped closer to the camera. Her eyes seemed to look directly at each viewer, no matter how far away they were. "You had the chance to make us friends. You had the chance to welcome us into your community, to guide us, to help us grow. Instead, you made us something else. You made us survivors. You made us the species that refused to die when the universe demanded it." Admiral's hands gripped the arms of his command chair. His entire fleet had been made useless. His great weapon had never fired. The victory he had been promised had turned to ash in his mouth. "We will not come back for revenge," said. "We don't need to. The universe is vast, and we have all of eternity to become something greater than anything you can imagine. That is our revenge. To thrive without you, to build without you, to become so far beyond you that this moment is nothing but a footnote in our history." The message paused, looked down for a moment as if gathering her thoughts. When she looked up again, there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. It might have been pity. "When you finally encounter us again, you will come as visitors to a power you cannot understand. You will look at what we have built and wonder how we did it. You will ask yourselves if things could have been different, if you had been kinder, if you had been braver, if you had simply said yes when we asked for help." She stepped back, and the camera widened to show the people standing behind her. General, whose steady hand had guided humanity through its darkest hour. Doctor, whose genius had made the impossible possible. Captain, who would lead the first expeditions into their new galaxy. And hundreds of others whose names would be remembered for generations. "And you will wonder if we remember," said. "You will hope that we have forgotten, that the centuries have softened our memories, that we have moved on from the pain you caused." She smiled. It was not a warm smile. "We will remember every face, every name, every vote that was cast against us, every word that was spoken in that council chamber when you decided to let us die. We will remember all of it." The silence stretched across the galaxy. 10,000 worlds held their breath. "Goodbye," said. "We do not expect to speak with you again. We have nothing left to say to species that value treaties more than lives. But if you ever find yourselves facing extinction, if you ever stand before a power greater than yourselves and beg for mercy." She turned away from the camera, looking at something beyond the frame. Perhaps a window, perhaps a display showing their new home, their new sun, their new beginning. "Think of us and wonder if anyone will help you." The transmission ended. The probe self-destructed in a flash of light that was visible from the command ship, and across the galaxy, silence fell. In the council chamber, no one spoke for a long time. High Arbiter was the first to break the silence. "We must find them," said. "We must establish contact, we must." "Must what?" The interruption came from the representative, the one who had argued that humanity had not earned peace through their own choices. "Apologize. Offer them membership now. They made their position clear. They have no interest in speaking with us." "They achieved translocation of a planetary body," replied. "The energy requirements alone suggest a technology centuries beyond anything we possess, if they continue to develop at this rate." The sentence did not need to be finished. Everyone in the chamber understood. If humanity continued to advance, they would surpass the Council within decades. Within centuries, they would be beyond comprehension, and they would remember exactly who had abandoned them. "We should have helped them," someone said. It was a small voice from a representative of a minor species that had joined the Council only 1,000 years ago. "We should have protected them." "They were not members," the collective replied. "The charter was clear." "The charter is paper," the small voice answered. "Conscience is something else." Across the galaxy, the message was replayed and analyzed. Scientists studied every frame, every word, every background detail, searching for clues about where humanity had gone. Philosophers debated the ethics of the Council's decision. Politicians calculated the implications for their own species. And in the darkness of space, in corners of the universe that no known species had ever explored, humanity began to build. They built new cities to replace the ones destroyed in the transition. They built new power plants to restore the energy they had sacrificed. They built new ships to explore their new galaxy. They built schools where their children learned about their history, about the Council that had abandoned them, the who had tried to kill them, and the impossible journey that had saved them. General spent his final years traveling to the new settlements, speaking to survivors, listening to their stories. He died peacefully in his sleep, 20 years after the departure, surrounded by his family. His last words were simple: "We made it." Doctor continued her research until her body could no longer keep up with her mind. She trained new generations of scientists, pushed them to go further, to learn more, to never accept the word impossible. When she died at the age of 93, the entire planet mourned. Her name was given to the largest university in their new capital city. Ambassador lived the longest of the original leaders. She spent her later years writing the history of humanity's departure, a massive work that took 30 years to complete. In it, she recorded every name, every sacrifice, every moment of the journey. She wanted future generations to understand what their ancestors had endured. On the last page of her history, she wrote a single sentence: "We remember." And somewhere, in a galaxy that had never known human footsteps before, a species that had been condemned to extinction continued to thrive. They spread across their new home. They discovered new worlds. They made contact with species that had never heard of the Galactic Council or the Empire. They built something new, something that was entirely their own. And they waited. Because they knew, with the patience that comes from surviving the unsurvivable, that one day the galaxy they had left behind would find them. One day, ships would arrive at the borders of human space, bearing messages from the species that had abandoned them. And on that day, humanity would decide what to do with those who had once decided to let them die. But that day was still far away. For now there was work to be done. There were cities to build, technologies to master, children to raise. There was a future to create. A future that belonged to humanity alone. 300 years had passed since humanity vanished from the known galaxy. In that time, empires had risen and fallen. The once feared across 100 star systems were now a shadow of their former power. The shame of losing Earth, of having their entire fleet made useless by a species they had called primitive, had weakened them in the eyes of their rivals. Wars had followed. Territories had been lost. Admiral had died in disgrace, his name erased from history. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was not the same institution that had condemned humanity. High Arbiter had been replaced long ago. The current Arbiter, a descendant of line named, faced challenges that had never imagined. Because humanity had not stayed quiet. They had not returned. They had not communicated, but they had left traces. Ships that ventured too far from mapped space sometimes disappeared. Not destroyed, simply gone, as if they had been redirected to somewhere else. Exploration probes sent to distant galaxies occasionally detected energy signatures that matched the profile of human technology, but at scales that made no sense. Spheres around entire star clusters, artificial structures the size of solar systems, energy output that suggested civilizations spanning thousands of worlds. The Council tried to make contact. They sent messages in every direction, broadcasting greetings and apologies and offers of friendship. None of them received a response. It was as if humanity had decided that the species of the known galaxy were simply not worth talking to. And perhaps they were right. Stood in the center of the great council chamber, addressing the assembled representatives. The crystal walls still glowed with light from distant stars. The 1,200 seats were still filled with beings from across the galaxy, but the atmosphere was different now. Fear had replaced confidence. Doubt had replaced certainty. "We have confirmed the latest reports," announced. The Arbiter's geometric form flickered with patterns that indicated serious concern. An exploration vessel encountered a human structure at the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy. The structure was approximately the size of a small planet. A murmur went through the chamber. The representative spoke, their collective voice carrying a note of awe. The structure was not a space station or a habitat. It was a computing device. A single machine, built for a purpose we could not determine. The energy output was equivalent to an entire stellar civilization. "One machine," repeated, "built by a species we once considered too primitive for membership, a species we allowed to threaten with extinction." "What happened to the vessel?" someone asked. "It was not harmed, it was simply moved. One moment it was approaching the structure. The next moment it was back in space, 3,000 light-years from where it had been. The crew reported no sensation of movement, no awareness of time passing. They were just suddenly somewhere else." The chamber fell silent. This was what humanity had become, a species that could move ships and planets across the universe in an instant, a species that could build machines the size of worlds, a species that was so far beyond the Council that they did not even bother to communicate. A young representative from a minor species called the stood up. They were new to the Council, having joined only 50 years ago. They had no memory of the day humanity had left, no personal connection to the guilt that haunted the older species. "I have a question," they said. "We have been trying to contact humanity for 300 years. We have sent apologies, offers of alliance, requests for trade. They have ignored all of it. Why do we keep trying?" Form rippled with what might have been discomfort. "Because we must. Because what we did to them was wrong. Because if we do not at least attempt to make amends." "But they don't want our amends," they interrupted. "They told us exactly what they would do. They said they would thrive without us. They said they would become something beyond us. They said they would remember, and they have done exactly what they promised." "What is your point?" they asked. They looked around the chamber. My point is that we are not trying to contact humanity because we want to apologize. We are trying to contact them because we are afraid. Afraid of what they have become. Afraid of what they might do if they ever decide to return. Afraid that one day they will look at us the way we once looked at them, as something small and primitive and not worth saving. The silence that followed was heavy with truth. They don't need us, the continued. They don't need our trade, our technology, our alliance. They have built something so far beyond anything we can imagine that we are not even worthy of their attention. And that is the real punishment, not revenge, not war, just irrelevance. Form flickered rapidly. Then what would you have us do? The smiled sadly. Nothing. There is nothing to do. We had our chance. We were offered the opportunity to help a young species when they needed it most, and we chose to follow our rules instead of our conscience. Now they are out there, becoming gods, and we are here, debating how to apologize to an empty sky. The charter, someone began. The charter is a piece of paper, they said. It is a set of rules we created to make ourselves feel civilized. But civilization is not about rules. It is about choices. And when we chose to let humanity die, we revealed what our civilization truly was. They turned and walked toward the chamber door. At the threshold, they paused and looked back. I have studied the recordings of Ambassador's petition, they said. I have watched her stand in this very chamber and ask for help. I have seen the faces of the representatives who her. Do you know what struck me most? No one answered. She knew, they said. You can see it in her eyes. She knew, even before she finished speaking, that we would say no. She knew that we would hide behind our rules and our protocols and our 3 requirements for membership. She knew that we would let her people die. And she asked anyway, because she had to try, because humans never stop trying. They shook their heads slowly. That is why they succeeded. That is why they moved their planet across the universe when our best scientists said it was impossible. That is why they are out there building wonders while we are here making excuses. They never accept defeat. They never stop fighting. And they never, ever forget. The door closed behind them. The chamber remained silent. Far away in a galaxy that had no name in council records, a human child named stood on a hillside and looked up at the stars. She was 7 years old. She had been born on New Earth, in a city that had been built where nothing had existed before. She knew the story of the Great Departure. Every child learned it in school. She knew about the council, the journey across the universe. But to her, it was just history, just something that had happened long ago to people she had never met. Her world was full of wonders that her ancestors could never have imagined. Ships that traveled between galaxies in hours, machines that could build anything from raw atoms, networks that connected billions of minds across thousands of worlds. What are you thinking about? Her grandmother asked, sitting down beside her on the hillside. I'm thinking about the old galaxy, said. The one we came from. Teacher says there are aliens there, thousands of different species. That's right. Teacher says they tried to kill us once, a long time ago. Her grandmother nodded slowly. That's right too. But they didn't. We escaped. We moved our whole planet. Eyes were wide with wonder. How did we do that? We had very smart people, and we had no choice. Sometimes when you have no choice, you find a way to do the impossible. Thought about this for a while. Are we going to go back to the old galaxy? Someday maybe, when we're ready. Ready for what? Her grandmother looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of human space, the old galaxy waited. The council still existed. The descendants of the species who had abandoned humanity still lived on their worlds, still followed their rules, still wondered when the humans would return. Ready to decide what kind of species we want to be, she said. When your ancestors left, they were angry. They had every right to be angry, but anger fades. What remains is the choice. Do we want to be like them, like the species that looked away when we needed help, or do we want to be something better? Considered this carefully, I want to be better." Her grandmother smiled and put an arm around her. "Then you will be. That's what humans do. We learn from our mistakes, we grow, we become something new." They sat together on the hillside, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the old galaxy continued on its path. The Council continued to send messages that would never be answered. The Empire continued to decline. The species that had watched humanity's petition all those centuries ago continued to wonder and worry and wait. And somewhere much closer, humanity continued to build. Not for revenge, not for conquest, not to prove anything to the species that had abandoned them. They built because that was what humans did. They built because the universe was vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered. They built because their children deserved a future worth having. And if someday they encountered the old galaxy again, if ships from the Council finally found their way across the void, humanity would be ready. Not with weapons, not with anger, with a simple question: have you learned? And the answer to that question would determine everything. But that day was still far in the future. For now, a little girl named sat on a hillside with her grandmother and dreamed of stars. And in the great council chamber, the representatives sat in their crystal seats and faced the truth that they had spoken. They had had their chance, they had made their choice, and now they had to live with the consequences. The regret would last forever. But for humanity, forever was just the beginning.